Hi there, my name is James Scott. I'd like to welcome you to Valley to Vietnam. Valley to Vietnam is a joint venture between the Sacramento Public Library and the Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 500. It's our intent to trace the arc of experience of our local veterans from stateside to Vietnam and then back again. Today our guest is a Sacramento kid, Ken Mack, who served with the 173rd Light Infantry Brigade. Ken, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome, and of course, welcome home. And just before starting to film, Ken had a great idea. He said, let's start this whole thing with a funny story with a very interesting local connection that I think a lot of us can relate to, whether it's with library stuff or maybe parking violations. Anyway, I'm just going to stop talking and hand it over to Ken. Here we are in the Central Highlands.
Central Highlands, Vietnam, triple canopy jungle. We had just gotten resupplied, and the resupply technique is the helicopter would pull over the top above the treetops, and they would just shove the sea rations, ammunition, whatever you needed, just push it out, and it would just come falling down through the trees. Along with it came mail, and I went over and picked up the mail for my platoon. And on the way back, I saw that there was a letter from my parents, and then one from American River College. So I opened up the one to American River. In it was a bill for $15 for lab fees. I have to say, I still haven't paid that bill.
But at the time, you were thinking, come and get it, AARC.
Come on and get it, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought that, no matter what, they'll track you down.
They will. They most certainly will. And all's well that ends well. And hello, Milwaukee Public Library. I am in Sacramento. So you spent time at AARC, and of course, a huge part of your childhood in Sacramento and the Carmichael area. But your earliest years were spent in a very interesting part of western Montana known as Hungry Horse. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Hungry Horse is about halfway between Kalispell and the west entrance to Glacier Park. And it's only about that big. I believe that at the time there was 120 people lived there. And everybody who lived there, or most of the people who lived there, worked on Hungry Horse Dam for the government. But it was down in this beautiful little valley. I remember going out our front door and looking up at this steep mountain on the opposite side of the valley, and we could see mountain goats on it. In the evening, the bears would run through. Moose, elk were all through the area. One of my favorite and earliest memories of the bears of the area was I heard my mom start screaming. She grabbed a broom. She ran out the back door of our house. There was a bear tearing apart our trash cans, and she went out there and started beating on the bear with this broom, yelling that my mom had a temper.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
She did. And my dad heard about this, and he came home and says, "You have 4 kids. You can't go beating up on bears with a broom." And she said, she just looked him in the eye and told him, "You're not the one who has to clean out the garbage." So
all right.
It was a great place to grow up.
Yeah.
Beautiful area of the country, and I had many trips into Glacier Park.
Okay. And of course now a national park, and your dad was working for the Bureau of Reclamation at the time as a surveyor. Mm-hmm. And of course he probably had a lot of early mornings. And tell us a bit about waking you guys up, and then the element of music becoming a sort of a humoristic part of your existence.
Yeah, my dad would come down the hallway. He would swing open our door just a little bit, reach inside, bang on the door, bang on the inside wall next to the light, and yell, "Get up!" Off into the living room, kitchen, and he would turn on classical music. And so what I always remember of waking up to in the morning was all kinds of classical music. We would get up, we would have breakfast, my dad would head off to work, and as soon as my dad left, my mom would go in and turn on her country western station. And so I had that kind of exposure on both sides.
Hank Williams and Beethoven, dueling away in Hungry Horse, Montana.
But our favorites were the story, The Shadow, The Lone Ranger. We had no television.
Right. Okay.
So all our touch to the other world was all radio.
Right. Right. And you lived in in the wilds of Montana, and one of the stories that I really enjoyed during our pre-production talks was the place of a snowplow in your birth. If you could talk to that a bit.
There was a really close community. And sometimes that was over a vast area. But my mother was pregnant with me, and it was getting close to the time I was to be born, and they called in to Kalispell, and the snowplow driver came out to where we lived, which was about 15-20 miles out to where our house was, picked up my mom, took her back. We had relatives that lived in Kalispell, and my mom went to stay with them until it was time, until I was born.
Right. So, and it's a fantastic story of a community coming together, making it happen, and I just love it. It's really great. So you'd mentioned television, not so much television or no television when you were in Montana. The first time you had a TV is when your dad took a new job, Reading, and then you guys moved down to Sacramento. Tell us about entering this new world of Sacramento and Carmichael. Tell us what you can about that.
First of all, I'd never seen so many people. This was, even though at that time Carmichael, Sacramento would, by today's standard, relatively small. And I remember grade school and high school, I kept wondering, how am I going to remember everybody's name? There were something like 2,000 in my high school class, or in El Camino. And I just was kind of lost. There was that transition with the many more people to interact with. But on the humorous side is that we were so used to wearing long underwear,
right,
that we would always get up in the morning and put our long underwear on. It got to my mom kept telling us, no, this is California, it's too warm for that. Finally, she just took our underwear and chopped it up and threw it away. So
right.
Okay, you're in California now.
Right.
You don't have to worry
Palm trees, all that good stuff. So you got most of your early education through Star King Middle School, and then moving on to El Camino. You speak really highly of your El Camino experience. Can you talk a little bit about that? The experience at El Camino was, I always thought that I was kind of average, little above average in my schooling. So I never really gave it much thought, and I knew a lot of our guys that I graduated with were, one went on to be a Rhodes Scholar, were going to Ivy League colleges, and that. But what really impressed me as I moved on into my life in the service and in work life afterwards, that I didn't realize how highly educated I actually was. Right.
I started interacting with people that could barely read and write. whose concept of history was that the Civil War was last year. And these different points of view.
Right.
I was also interacting with guys that were incredibly well educated and intelligent and bright from both sides, uneducated and educated.
Exactly, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But of course, good things from El Camino High School, one of Sacramento's great high schools. So you finished high school, and here's that ARC again. So you decided to go ahead and give a shot with Los Rios. Tell us a bit about that and chemistry class.
Professor Newman, she was the chemistry instructor, and the classroom was in an amphitheater. So there was I think there was about close to 100 students, and then the lab was were in between, and I was sitting there, and I wasn't relating that well to her, if she's still out there. Sorry, but on the step between me and the guy next to me, we had set up a chessboard.
Okay.
We had set up a chessboard, so we decided to do was during the course of the lecture we would play chess. After a while, I said, you're just not taking this seriously enough. Maybe I should be looking for another line of work.
Right. And in time, of course, the military becomes an option.
Military was an option. My first choice was actually the Coast Guard, but the waiting list was 5 years.
Goodness.
And in that time period, I could still be drafted.
Right. Okay.
So I really wasn't interested in the Marines, and the Air Force really didn't strike my fancy too much either. So I decided, well, I'll just go ahead and in the Army and see what was available.
Okay. And this is about 1964, 65?
This is 65.
Okay.
This is 65. So I go in, and oddly enough, the recruiter that signed me up, Sgt Justice, also came around and spoke at El Camino High School.
Oh, okay.
So I had seen him before, and he was the one who processed me in, and off to Oakland I went.
Right. And so you actually tested very well.
Yes.
I mean, you had a conversation with him about your MOS and all the different options you had, but there was one thing in particular that you really, really wanted to do. Can you talk about that?
Sgt Justice, he told me that my options were pretty wide open here. I couldn't be a pilot because my eyes weren't that good, and engineering, OCS, was out because I needed a degree in engineering. So he said, just pretty much everything else is open, including OCS. But I said, no, I wanted to go in to the Airborne, to the paratroops. And I actually said the paratroops, and he said the Airborne.
Oh, that's
and I said, no, the paratroops. And he goes, well, that is the Airborne. I'm going, well, hadn't thought that through.
Right.
So off I went. And he tried to talk me out of it, to his credit. He did. But I was determined, and a couple of buddies of mine have you lost your mind? But off I went.
You saw it, right. You saw what you wanted, and you saw it through. So one question I wanted to ask was a lot of, like your dad, a lot of kids or young men in this first part of the 60s had fathers who had served during the Second World War. Did you gain any romantic inspiration from the D-Day invasions and the 101st and the 82nd? And did that play a part in your maybe moving toward the Airborne?
Maybe a little bit. Not really. It was pretty simplistic. I had never ridden in an airplane before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
Yeah. And now
They said if
you're
you
gonna
sign
jump
up
out
for
of
this, you get to ride in an airplane.
Right.
It was a little more than that, of course, but that was kind of and I always wondered what parachuting would be like. So there might have been some dreams of this, but I was getting a really good idea that there was, even from the start, that it wasn't going to be the romantic adventure that everybody talked about. That wasn't really foremost in my mind.
Right.
So what I did was kind of headed in that direction. And actually I don't regret it. There might be a few things that I would do differently, but the same overall plan I would have stayed with.
Okay. Okay. So Oakland, and then you're off to Fort Polk, Louisiana, for your basic
Fort Polk.
training, and then you still want to be a paratroop. So you or paratrooper. So you go ahead and you join up and you go through enormous training. And one thing that we talked about a little bit earlier, which I think is fascinating, the 250 tower. Can you tell us a bit about that? And we're going to go ahead and flash a picture so you can actually see the 250 tower, but if you could talk about that.
The 250 tower is actually a crane that hoists you with a hoop on the end that clips onto your parachute, and it hoists you vertically up 250 feet. And then when you're holding on to a line that's attached to a pin, and that's a safety pin. So you have to pull on that pin. That allows the parachute to be released, and then there is an NCO that's across from you in the tower, and he signals. There's a little pop, and then you drift down to the ground and you do your landing. All the time, as you're going down, you're being coached by the people on the ground on how to do your landing, keep your legs together, and then that's one of the apparatus. Another one is a swing landing trainer, where they take you and they put you in different positions and swing you, so you learn to fall backwards, forwards, to the side.
Okay.
And then there's the 34-foot tower.
Right. Okay.
Where you go out and they actually will get a really good idea if you are going to panic and not jump on the 34-foot tower.
And why 34 feet?
34 feet, apparently they had done research. This is the scariest height. Anything higher is just abstract. It's just high. Anything lower, but 34 feet seems to be as scary as they could, because they could have made everything lower. Right. But they did that just to make it scarier. And if you're going to freeze or fail, then you're not going to, that's where you're going to do it. Right. But there's some that still, when you got to the door, they would still lock up on you. Right. Even all through.
Sure. Sure. So you guys, because you're going to be landing on your own 2 feet from very, very high elevations, you're going through tremendous strength training, lower body strength training. Can you talk about that a little bit?
A lot of running. It started in infantry training. They knew that we were going to be, the group I was with, they'd be going to jump school. So what they would do is, as the other soldiers were resting, we would run around them. Okay. And so we continued that. So when I got to jump school, you never took one step without running. Okay. They would allow you one step. After that, you're running. And wherever you went, if you mess hall, and then all the time when you're not running, they're having you do deep knee bends and squat thrusts, and so you're constantly conditioning your legs,
quads and tendons, and you're ready to go. Plus, you must have had amazing cardiovascular health.
Yeah, it's one of the final things they did on the conditioning phase of jump school was a 5-mile run The last mile of it is in sand.
Oh my goodness.
And so we went around and, we completed that run. And okay, we did the 5 miles. We pulled up there, and the instructor looked at us, and we're all sitting there. We're barely breathing.
Yeah.
And he's going, said, "Surprise!" He goes, "Hey, feeling good?" Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Feel good.
So, tell us a bit about. I mean, I know everybody wants to hear this. You had how many total jumps did you have to do?
You had to do 5 to get
Okay.
your wings.
Okay. So tell us about that first jump, and tell us about that final jump, if you could compare them.
For me, and a lot of it is individual, but for me, the first jump was the easiest.
Okay.
Scary wise, technically they're all pretty much
It's
the
all
same.
relative. Yeah. Okay.
So it was the easiest, and then the ones after that, you're starting to think, well, is this the brightest thing I ever did? And then you went up to your 5th jump. 5th jump is when you got out. When you landed, then no matter what condition, even if you died, you still got your wings.
Okay.
So we got out, and there weren't any, no one died on any of these, but we had a lot of injuries during the course of the 5 days. They had what they called cattle trucks, and you could fit 100 people per cattle truck. In my jump school class, which was about 1,200, said 300 of those went to the hospital after the 5th jump.
Wow. And you had mentioned that injuries happened. I mean, this is a hard thing on one's body, and injuries took place, but guys just wouldn't give up. Tell us a bit about that.
One of the guys, and he was actually a Marine, who was in a Airborne Marine Reserve unit, and he had been in an automobile accident, motorcycle accident, and he had lost on the upper part of his foot, had lost a chunk of it and had to have a skin graft. During all the running and the exercise and stuff, the skin graft started peeling back. So what he did was he just wrapped his, taped everything up, laced up his boot. He slept with his boots on.
Right.
And as you would go down through the barracks, you could see the guys that who weren't taking their boots off at night.
Yeah. Right.
And were wrapping their legs. Some of them wouldn't take their pants off.
Right.
Because it was all wrapped up and just kept going.
Yeah. They wanted those silver wings.
Yeah, they didn't want to do it again.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's good point. So at this point, you're with the 82nd Airborne.
I went directly from jump school, which is at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay.
And then went to Fort Bragg, short hop. And I was introduced there, went into the 505th, and I think it was the 3rd 505th Infantry, and I was with them for a year and a half.
Okay.
And I worked my way up from PFC, got up to Specialist 4th Class, Spec 4, and then I transferred. They decided that they were going to form 3rd Battalion of the 173rd.
Okay.
And so I volunteered and transferred over into that.
Okay.
And then shortly after that, one of my platoon sergeant came up to me and said, put on a clean pair of fatigues, you're going up before the board, and we're going to make you a sergeant.
Okay.
And I'm going, I don't want to be a sergeant. Why me? And he was really very calm about it. He said, first of all, I don't care what you want. And second of all, he said, look around. And he said, if you can find somebody there, point somebody out who is better than you are, and I will promote him.
Right.
Anyway, I looked around and I'm going, oh God. So he gave me the answers that they were going to give me. Said,
Yeah.
these are the 5 questions that they're going to ask you. These are the answers you give. Go in there, and I walked in, did the dog and pony show thing, and they came out and they said, congratulations, you're a sergeant.
Right. And you're a leader.
You're a leader.
You're a leader. So one of the really interesting stories or things that came up in pre-production was, and it all came out of a question that I had asked you, because there's such, to me, a huge contrast between what one would find in western Montana and then what one would find in the central highlands of South Vietnam. And I had asked you, when you were near An Khê or in the Bong Sang Valley, did you ever think about Hungry Horse? And I just, your answer was interesting, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Hungry Horse, you know, it was a obviously formidable years, and I have all these fond memories of Hungry Horse. But I thought everybody lived with this kind of deep snow and the short summers and all that. But most of my memories, what I think of home is always Carmichael and Sacramento. But I always think fondly of my life growing up and the way things were in Montana. It was a very simple life. You had your neighbors were always there for you, because in some cases it was a matter of survival for everyone.
True.
I had one person ask me once, he said, you know, if you're snowed in for 3 months, what happens if you get sick? And I said, you get better or you die.
Right.
I said, it's pretty much the harsh truth of it. The forest rangers would try and get to you.
Okay.
If you could communicate that out.
Okay.
So.
Right. And the other thing you'd mentioned was if you were in Vietnam and your patrol had taken a break, or you were back at a fire base, you would tell a fellow officer or fire team leader, I need a moment, I'm going to go do something, and you called that going home. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, some of us would actually, they pretty much do the same thing, where you can only concentrate for so long. And so there would be that time when I just said I would just need to go home, and I would sit down and I would picture coming into the bus station, the Greyhound bus station downtown Sacramento, and I would walk myself all the way home. It was try to remember all the streets. It was getting harder and harder toward the end of my tour to remember all the streets. I need to turn here and turn at this street, and then it's just a few doors down, and that's where my house is, and the house is going to look like this. But I kept focusing on that was one of the things. And other guys would do it. They would just, you would be in a foxhole, and you just slide down into the foxhole. Somebody would be on guard, and it's kind of a half sleep sometimes. And you would just try and
slash meditation,
and just you just leave this chaos for a little bit. There was always something to drag you back. As soon as the radio would break squelch, then you're back in the game, and
that was it.
You're back to the reality of where you were. Some people called it going back to the world.
Yeah, right.
But it was it helped. It helped with the craziness.
Right.
It was in the chaos that was often going around you.
Right. One thing I'm interested in, so the 173rd, you're going to go to Vietnam mid to late 1967. You're going to go overseas. And in pre-production, we had talked about this a bit, about how when the United States officially entered the Vietnam War post Gulf of Tonkin, we have these Time magazine photos of the Marines hitting the beach near Da Nang, and it was very much a PR thing, giving us the impression that it was the Marines that hit the beach. But in reality, there was another unit that was responsible for securing those beaches. What unit was that?
That was the 173rd, which was the 1st Regular Army unit in Vietnam. And they had been in Vietnam for several months. And so they were tasked with going down, securing the beach. And then they brought the newsmen in where they could, to set up on the beach. And then the unit was ordered to cover up their positions that were on the beach or visible. And then they brought in the newsreel stuff. Then they had their amphibious landing.
Right.
And then inland we went. You'll have a lot of Marines that will argue about that, but that's okay. That was one of the tasks that they gave them. As they went inland, since the 173rd had been operating in that area. Oh, and by the way, at that particular time, the 173rd Airborne was a combination of half American forces and half Australian.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it wasn't just us. There was also the Australian paratroops.
Okay.
And they escorted them in, and then what they did was they patrolled with the Marines integrating in until they were good to go, which wasn't long. They were well trained.
Right.
And then off we went.
Well, that's an interesting sort of thing, a joint U.S. Army Marine operation, which I don't know was too common in Vietnam.
It was kind of spotty. For instance, one of the things is the 173rd Airborne was stationed in Okinawa,
right,
on the Marine base there.
Right. So it would make some sense.
They were used to. There was that interaction, good and bad, with it. But you talk about service rivalry. I've got a couple of stories about my interaction with the Marines, and it was always very positive.
Yeah,
it was
playful.
No, actually, it was just nice. One of them was we were working near the ocean. We were outside of an artillery fan, so they brought in a destroyer so they could fire support for us, and they gave us a Marine forward observer.
Okay.
So we were setting up small unit ambushes and listening posts along this section of the coast, and the destroyer would move offshore back and forth. The Marine forward observer, he called in and said, these guys have been telling you they haven't heard any kind of music at all. So the destroyer pulled in, they put speakers out on the deck, and it was like our own boombox.
Oh, that's so cool.
Well, went back and forth, and for about 2 hours, we didn't really get the word. I was sitting out on this ambush, and all of a sudden, here comes all this rock and roll music, and I'm going, oh God, what's happening now? But they thought, oh yeah, they do something nice for us. So
that's a terrific story. That's an awesome story. So just to backtrack a moment or two, so you came across on a boat, right? And as chance would have it, you guys would leave from the same dock as your dad.
Yeah, my dad served in the Pacific in World War II. He was with a Guard artillery outfit, and same dock in Alameda. It was a different boat. I was on the SS Weagle.
That's right, the Weagle.
That was, and it was built later on in World War II. So at least we weren't on the same boat.
Right.
But I thought it was the same thing. I mean, all these years ago, my dad, he went under the Golden Gate Bridge just like I did, and he went a little bit farther south. He went to Australia. My first stop was the Philippines.
Subic Bay. Right.
Subic Bay, and then from there we pushed on to Vietnam.
Okay, all right. So your unit arrives in Vietnam, and eventually you find yourself in the Central Highlands.
Central Highlands.
Now, in pre-production, we talked a bit about how you are together with a cross-section of America, so many different fellows from different parts of the country, different socioeconomic statuses, educational statuses. But there was one fella in particular, his name was McSorley, and he was a New Yorker, and he was absolutely awed by everything he saw. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
McSorley and I met at Fort Bragg, and we just kind of went through with the 173rd into the 173rd together. And he had never been off concrete, never been out of the city in his life. He had never, the closest he ever got to driving a car was that he knew a guy who had a driver's license but didn't have a car. So he was, and they actually made a driver out of him for a while.
Oh my goodness.
How scary was that? And it was. He was different. But you would be out in the field and you would see, you would tell him, just follow this rabbit trail down. Not a clue what a rabbit trail was. And he saw a cow one day and he goes, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, that's a cow." And he just, my God, I've seen pictures of him, but first time, everything was through new eyes. He was just incredibly enthusiastic.
Right.
He even found his way into long-range patrol.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So he found his way there.
The LRPs.
And I just shaking my head. I said, "This guy is, as a babe in the woods, but he learned fast."
Right. Okay.
He was really a bright guy. So he and he was fun to be with. He was a good human being.
Cool. So, and that sort of segues us into this great quote, also on this topic, this great quote that you gave us. I got more impressed, and I quote, "I got more impressed with people who were uneducated but incredibly bright." Talk a little bit about that, if you could.
I had a squad leader, later a platoon sergeant, and his name was Bob Manning, and he was from Detroit.
Okay.
And he was career, and I like playing chess, so he asked, "Could you show me how to play that?" So we sat down, and in just a few moves, I beat him. I just explained to him how this worked. And he just looked at me and he goes, I explained to him, and he said, "We're going to play once a month." And every time that he came back, he was so dramatically, at the end of the month, dramatically better. And till it was really a good game by the time we got to Vietnam, because we were playing almost every day on the ship over. Just really a bright guy who never graduated from high school. But I also served with some guys who knew him from Detroit, and they said that this, he was just that close to making the Olympic team for track and field. Great athlete, bright guy, but he was also kind of a wild and crazy guy.
Right. Okay.
But he was good. He was kind of like our guru. He'd give us 20 reasons on why you should do something this way.
Right.
Which is something I always look for in a leader. If I would go up there and I would say, well, what about this? And they started chewing me out for being so ignorant, and I would just sit back and go, he's not the guy. I would go over here, and then I would go find a guy who could give me 10 reasons why I should do it like this, and good reasons, and I found that the best NCOs and officers were also good teachers.
Okay, right. So, I mean, this speaks to the fact that just because you had, a degree or you had, gotten a bar or 2 bars on your lapel didn't necessarily mean that you could get it done or lead men or keep them out of harm's way or get them to make good, sound decisions. Correct?
Yes. At all levels, you had from Sergeant E5s all the way up. You would run into people who were really good at logistics, really good at the business of managing a unit, but when it came to the leadership portion, they were very much lacking.
Right. Okay.
In most cases, the tactics on a battlefield will change at least every 6 months.
Right. Okay.
So you have to have those people who, they walk out there with a book, and this is how we're going to do it from now on. But I knew that if I left the battlefield for a year, it's going to take me a couple of months to get caught up.
Right.
When I got back. So you were looking at those people who were going, well, okay, I've got this figured out, and we're going to start changing this. But you're also looking at it at various levels, which would be from the commander, the company commander, battalion commander. I had read a book. Who they were saying that the Vietnam was more or less a squad, a platoon, a company war, as opposed to an army.
Right.
So it was you had these officers that you could rely on, and you kind of sorted it out pretty quick.
Right. So you were learning the war on the fly, like you said.
Yes.
The tactics were changing so quickly that different units had their own way of handling things in different parts of the country, which gives it a very sort of micro unit focus.
Because you wouldn't, in the Central Highlands, your tactics there would be different than if you were out, say, in the Bong Song Valley, where you're working in villages and along the coast.
Right. Okay.
So you, instead of working in large units in unison, you would be working in fire teams, squad, patrols, split up all over a valley.
Tell us the importance that you witnessed of really, really good non-commissioned officers in providing leadership and know-how.
Bob Manning, he was one of them. There's one story which I won't go into, which he just showed this level of leadership. He very tactfully come up and he said, I'm not going to make you a squad leader, and this is why. And after he was done, it was very insightful.
Right.
And but it was one of those moments in time where he was giving me a really big reality check on what was coming. Right. He was just telling me, this is going to get bad.
Right.
And it started off with, I'm not going to make you squad leader. And I just said, okay. And then he just went on to say, you're the best guy I've trained and worked with in a long time. And I thought, wait a minute. I kind of looked at him. He said, yeah. And he went on to explain why.
Yeah. Right.
But it was, I had one officer that was an incredible leader, as a graduate of West Point. As a matter of fact, the gym at West Point was named after him after he was killed. Okay. He was just really bright, talented, and if he survived, he would be at the top of the corporation.
Gotcha.
He was really very good. We had there was a Mustang. Okay. Sergeant came up through the ranks and was company commander. And he was very good, but you also knew that they all had their faults, strengths
Right.
and weaknesses.
Right.
So there was going, and the lieutenants, and most of the ones I dealt with were second lieutenants as platoon leaders.
Right.
They ran the gamut from what are you doing here,
Right.
all the way up to really very good.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
You get to Vietnam, like I said, mid to late 1967, and after 1968 comes around, there's a change in things. The Tet Offensive takes place, and Walter Cronkite gets on national TV and says a thing or two, and then not long after that, Dr. King is assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a bit about unit cohesion and what you witnessed prior to those two events, and then what you witnessed afterward, and maybe give a couple of examples if you could?
Yeah, there was to say that it started with the Dr. King assassination would be like the environment at Fayetteville, North Carolina, with the 82nd.
Okay.
There was a main street that bisected the town. I don't know what the name of the street is. We just called it Combat Alley.
Okay.
Everything on that side of the street is black. Everything on this side of the street is white. Right in the middle there was the auction block where they sold slaves.
Oh my goodness.
So it's still there. While I was at Bragg, they closed the fort, Fort Bragg, because they were having a Ku Klux Klan rally in Fayetteville. So this was from the very beginning the big elephant in the room.
There's the tension. Okay.
There is the tension in all this. While I was there, they with the 82nd, they pulled us aside and they put us through a course in riot training because the Detroit riots are going on. Okay. Like I said, Bob Manning, his wife and two daughters were in the middle of all that, and they said that we might have to go up to get involved in that. So there was that. And matter of fact, Bob even said, went to the company commander and says, "Oh, okay, if I take my squad and we go in and I can get my family out." And the company commander said, "We'll see how it works, but we'll do it, get it done." But they were trapped. He hadn't heard from his family. And actually, there was a picture of him in that.
Oh, okay.
And the thing I brought in. But he, so it started with that. So the tension was already there. And then during the course of after one of the incidents that happened with me was this new guy just came in. He came up to me and he just said, "I want to be transferred back to the rear area." And I asked him, "Well, why is that?" And he had in his hand, he had a letter from his mother. He says, "My mother says that she doesn't believe that this war is right and doesn't believe I should be doing this, so she told me not to kill anybody." And the other guys are sitting back going, his mother told him not to kill anybody. Okay. I knew he was sincere. He was really very serious, but I just looked at him and I said, I'm just a sergeant. I can't authorize you to be sent back.
Right.
And he goes, "Well, I'm not going to kill anybody, and I really want to go and just be in the rear area." And I said, "I don't think this is going to happen." And he just said, "Well, you're not letting me go back because I'm black." And I'm going, "I think you need to talk to the company commander."
Yeah.
And so I took him up there, and the next resupply, he was gone.
Okay.
So I have no idea. And in all likelihood, the procedure is that he would be court-martialed and
Right.
gone home, but I'm not sure what happened.
Okay. And then there were other manifestations of just a changing culture in the Army with drug use and groups just sort of coming together into enclaves. It's just a different.
Yeah. Drugs were, obviously they were very common. At one time, going up the Bong Song Valley, we were weaving our way through all these villages, and for 5 days we worked our way up this valley. Never once did I leave sight of a marijuana grow.
Okay.
They were using marijuana as shade trees. It grows 22 feet high.
Right.
And for the hooches there made a nice shade tree.
Right.
There had to be a market for that somewhere. That was kind of like their money crop with rice.
Right.
For the most part, we dealt. It wasn't as much of an issue. We worked together with other units where the drugs were, a serious issue, and we tried to keep contact with them to a minimum. That isn't to say that there wasn't.
Right.
But it was also alcohol. It was pills.
Right.
We had one of the guys in our unit. He was in so much pain that he had a quart jar of Darvon tablets.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And he would just eat those as he went along. It was there was one guy. He kept going, but the skin on the bottom of his feet came off.
Oh my goodness.
But he would get up every day and keep pushing. Besides these incredible migraines, finding the medics had to get him out.
Yeah. Right.
But it was starting to tear the Army apart.
Right. Use the term unraveling. The whole thing was just sort of unraveling.
Just unraveling, and fortunately, I was worried about what was going to happen to the guys when I rotated back home. But one of the reasons why it was a hard decision to leave. But one of the reasons why I did was the NCOs. They brought some other NCOs in that were really very good and had more experience, and who were really very bright. So I was comfortable with walking away, and they were going to be with these guys for a long time. They were just coming in at the end of my tour. So I was comfortable with leaving.
So it gave you some peace of mind to know that these guys were going to be led by some capable people.
Yeah, the lieutenants kind of came and went. I think I went through 4 or 5 second lieutenants. There was only one was wounded. There was just one that was wounded, and that wasn't serious. The rest, they came and went, and it was and there was just one, well, actually 2 that I even remember their names.
Okay.
So toward the end of the tour, there's got to be kind of a blank.
Right. Gotcha.
Another guy in a green suit.
Yeah. Right. So your tour ended, and you came back, and there was an adjustment period, and there is adjustment, but your time here has been very, very interesting. You've been retired for a while now, but you spent 31 years with the Office of State Publishing, State California.
31 years with them. I was a machinist for most of the time, and I kind of worked my way up. The way I got that job is when I was a senior in high school. Okay. They had a program where you could go down and apply for jobs, state jobs, and it was encouraged. And I went down, and this was one of the places that I applied. And when I was in basic training, they called up and said, "Come on down."
Yeah, right.
So my parents, lifesavers, they came in and they wrote in and said, he's in the military right now. And they wrote back and says, when he gets out, have him give him a call. So as soon as I got home, sent in a letter, and about a month and a half later, they called up and says, come down for an interview, and if you've got a job.
Awesome.
So that thing. And then I got signed up for American River College. A lot of people, had the experience when they left, like Travis, that the people were picketing, and that was not my experience.
Right.
Okay, everything I had was stolen. So when I landed at Fort Lewis, I had a toothbrush, I had my shot record, my ID card, and my jungle fatigues.
Right. Okay.
So they just gave me a uniform, and home I went.
And that was it. Okay.
So I walked off the base, and they knew that at the same time every day all these guys were processed through, as all the protesters had gone home, I guess. Because when I walked out, where's everybody? So, found my way home, and then so I was working for at entry-level jobs for the Office of State Publishing.
And I've got to say, as the California State Documents librarian here at the Central Library, I will never look at a collection of statutes and take them for granted again, because there is hard work behind it all. Hard work behind it all. So you have, during the years back home, you've given a lot back to your community. And I want you to talk a little bit about that. The first thing that comes to mind is your time with Placer County Sheriff's Department's Search and Rescue Unit. If you could talk about that.
Every county in California, and it's the way California has it set up, every county has its own search and rescue unit.
Okay.
Sacramento County has it. I wanted to get more involved with search and rescue in the wilderness.
Okay. So
I went up to Auburn to the Placer County Search and Rescue Team, which was a very positive experience. We obviously, people go out and for a wide variety of reasons get lost, and we go out and find them using a variety of techniques. I would encourage anybody who likes walking around in the woods and camaraderie to go ahead and sign up. All you have to do is go to any sheriff department in California, and they should have a link somewhere in there for the search and rescue team.
And that was about 6 or 7 years you did that?
I did that for 6 years.
Okay.
6 years. And there was, of course, there was a lot of search stories that go along with that. But for several reasons, I got out. I needed a new knee.
Yeah. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, got that. Then my wife, the calls in the middle of the night, it's really bad weather, it's snowing, it's all this other thing, and off we go. So it was, she said, why don't you, kind of give up on that.
Put up your snowshoes and come on home.
Yeah. Mainly when it rained. There was just a few searches that we had where we were on the snowshoes. Mainly it was, our busy season was during the summer.
Right.
And the way the breakdown was is the guys that worked, they would search on the weekends, and the guys who didn't, the retired guys got the searches during the week.
Oh, okay. Right.
So you would kind of fill in on all of that. But all in all, it was a very positive experience, and I was part of a really good team.
Right, and sort of draws on that your Montana roots, being a man of the wilderness. And the other thing that I find really interesting is a little bit closer to home is your work with the American River Parkway. If you could talk about that. Kathy and I joined the American River Parkway, and at the same time we were working at REI. Okay.
Part of my retirement plan.
Right.
Went to work for REI, and what we did was we took over for about a year, mile 3 to 4.
Okay.
Down the bike trail. So we'd go down and keep it clean and organize work and cleanups all along for that portion of the bike trail. So when we left REI, we left that job behind. Some of the jobs that we got involved in was planting oak trees, going in, cleaning out star thistle, and watering and some of the groves. And so there were these tasks that they had all along there.
Right, and so don't go down the American River Parkway on your mountain bike and forget about the fact that it takes a lot of work by a lot of dedicated people to keep those trails clean and remediated and all that good stuff. Well, with that said, thank you so much for coming on Valley to Vietnam, Ken. Thank you and welcome home.
Did you want another funny story?
Oh my goodness, why wouldn't I? Let's hear another funny story.
I forgot to mention that I was also in the Boy Scouts.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But anyway, so I was in demolition school,
Okay.
a mini demolition course that they were giving at Fort Bragg.
Okay.
So I was sitting down, and the instructor comes in, and he is showing us how to blow up a bridge. And he
Okay.
goes, "Okay, where would you put the explosives to blow up this bridge?" And I was gung-ho. I raised my hand, and I said, "You do it here, 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 and here." And he looked at me, and he goes, "Why would you do that?" And I said, "You use the weight of the bridge to destroy itself." He said, "Have you had this course before?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm a new guy." He says, "Well, where did you learn that?" And I just very proudly puffed up and said, "Boy Scouts."
Always prepared.
Our explorer advisor was a demolition expert in World War II.
Oh my goodness.
And he would come in, and they finally had to tell him to tone it down. And he was showing us how to blow up buildings, and like the little teenage kids were going, "Wow." So anyway.
That's a great little story to end on. So on behalf of the Valley to Vietnam crew, I want to thank Ken for coming in and welcome home. And welcome home to all of our veterans. I want to thank my colleagues, Jerry Ward, producer, and also India Curry, producer, and then of course my co-host and interviewer, Bob Tribe. With that said, thanks a lot for viewing in, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Valley to Vietnam. We'll see you next time.